So in the end, the solution to this was to send it into the oven at 135 degrees to use thermal expansion to your advantage. Now, the rotor is going into a small section of the pump. This here is the cross section, or not the cross section, the blah, 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 blah.
Wow.
If you look very carefully at this point, you should take a micrometer gauge or something. This is what I did not do, and it ended up biting me in the butt. You need to know what the gap is between the rotor and the housing. This distance is set by wiggling the outer housing around, and I never recorded what that measurement was. I don't know if it's a sheet of paper, tin foil size, or less or more. The issue here is that the gap of this piece is what's going to set the ultimate pressure of this pump. If it's too close, it's going to rub and you're going to have excessive friction. If it's too far apart, you're going to have problems with your ultimate pressure because it's going to be bypassing, and there's not going to be enough of a thick oil film to block gases or anything, the pumped vapors, whatever you're doing, from just bypassing and circling around endlessly inside the pump. So I highly recommend seeing if you can measure that, because that's one thing I didn't do. And Ulvac, I emailed Ulvac and they don't have any documentation, or at least they're not willing to provide me with any. This pump is out of production since the 2000s or 90s, I want to say. So getting spare parts or anything like that is basically impossible. And you'll want to make sure you record that gap for both of these, both halves of this. Now, this is where the pump gets really difficult to disassemble. I was trying for hours to figure out, was there a set screw that I was missing? I will let past me explain a little bit more.
That 30-second conundrum. I'm trying to figure out how to get this flange off. Behind this, there's a couple of oil seals. I've tried carefully prying here. I'm not getting anything coming off. The motor, I can't get the motor off because there's no set screw or anything like that. I'm not sure if this is like a press fit or something like that. I'm not sure it's very well visible here, but if you guys got any ideas, let me know. Okay, I didn't take video of it, but I basically just used two big old friggin' screwdrivers pried up underneath this guy, and this thing is finally budging loose.
So the solution here was to put the whole entire pump body, or not the whole pump body, but the pump motor and the front assembly into an oven at 135 degrees. This will get you the heat necessary to loosen up the rusty bits and to loosen the bearing from the housing. So what you end up getting is this, which is the motor separated from the housing, and the rotor just kind of slip slash plugs in to the right hand section of this motor after passing through the bearing seals that are in here. Now from here, once you've gotten it apart, you can see the oil seals on the inside of the pump housing, and there are two oil seals. They're back to back. One's a nitrile, one's a Viton style, and you can pull the two apart. Don't forget this little tiny ring wave washer that helps a little pile pre-tension. This whole thing comes apart, but what you're going to want to do then is use a bearing puller to pull this main bearing off. Now, there is a little keyway inside here with an M2.5 by 7 millimeter screw, I think. I don't remember exactly. You can pull it and measure. It is, however, commonly rusted. In the both pumps that I've pulled apart, this screw was semi-rusted in place that holds this key in, and I ended up stripping out the Allen wrench. It is just a standard right hand, righty tighty, lefty loosey screw, but if you strip it, you can replace it. I highly recommend degreasing and cleaning up and derusting this whole entire section as much as you can. Once you've got everything apart, you can pull the oil seals out. As I said, they are back-to-back Viton and nitrile. Just make note of the orientation. The lips are pointing in towards each other. Here I'm using my trusty 45-degree bent Harbor Freight screwdriver to bash them out from the backside. There is a brass oil spacer in between, so you don't want to scratch that up. That just provides oil to the uh, oil seals. Just make sure you don't scratch the crap out of the raceways that the oil seals go into. From here, you can use a standard bearing puller. I think this is a Amazon bearing puller. The bearing itself, I can't remember what number it is. It's like a 608ZZ. It's a standard ABEC 1 bearing. There's nothing fancy. I think I paid like $5 for it or something like that. However, in the process of me disassembling this whole thing for the first time, I definitely wouldn't recommend reusing the bearing.
Yeah, got the bearing pulled. This thing is so crunchy. Got little spots where it sticks. I mean, I've been beating on this thing for a while, so I guess I can't be too surprised. You can hear all the crunchiness inside there.
From here, it's mostly just cleaning things up, degreasing things and making them look kind of nice, polishing up a little bit. Uh, you know, Here you can see how I marked the rotor for the vanes. So I had one marked as number one marked as number two, with an orientation as to how they fit in there. You really want to do this to make sure that those vanes go back in the same orientation, because that can be very critical to good operation. Um, the pump body itself then required some cleanup. The gasket really kind of shredded and left behind a whole lot of junk. As you can see here, the even cleaning up with like toluene and acetone, it just didn't get rid of anything, or not everything. And so what I ended up doing was just using a glass float, or float glass, and some 5,000 grit and 7,000 grit sandpaper to completely flatten and polish the surfaces, because just no amount of any kind of solvent would really get rid of the old gunk that had been in there. Um, to make a new gasket, I did two versions. So I had two pumps, and one of them I used this gray fiber sealing stuff from Amazon. The other stuff was just a sheet of Viton. I liked how the Viton worked better just because it had a little bit more give to it, but they both sealed perfectly well. Neither one has leaked. And so you can use the cheap stuff. Now, one of the things that I ended up doing was taking the pump body and putting it on my mill with the DRO to measure all the different points of the screw holes to make a 3D CAD model so that I could laser cut out a gasket. This is a test piece just with a piece of paper, making sure that all the holes line up. I left the same amount of overlap as the original gasket. I just used a 10-watt diode laser to cut the gasket, and it worked just fine. Now, one thing that I took a picture of to note here is that this did cause problems in that one of the times I was trying to loosen up this rotor, you can see this marking here. This is from a screwdriver. It's even though this is probably quite hard steel in this bushing raceway, this really did some damage. This pump was basically ruined from this. Was able to sand it out and clean it up so that it would work, but I don't think this pump will ever be the same just because of this one thing. This was me trying to get the rotor apart from the motor and not knowing exactly how things went together. So don't do something like this and try and harf on this with a screwdriver in there. It should be kind of a duh thing, but hey, I did it. But then again, I do stupid things. In the end, I was able to test the pump, and it worked fairly well. Starts up and ended up putting a pretty good vacuum. Here you can see it just going against my wallet and with a little O-ring, and it seems to pump just fine. The current was a little bit higher, but it still
Seems to
worked.
work.
And it held vacuums, so it's still decent. I ended up putting my BPG 400 gauge on this. This gauge isn't in the greatest of shapes, but after a little bit of 19 grade oil, I was able to do a comparison side by side test of this one pump that came out of my Denton 2 versus one I got off of eBay. This one that I've rebuilt on the left is the one I ended up putting back into the Denton 2. The one on the right is kind of a spare pump, and it ended up actually freezing because I didn't do any service. I just added oil. But in the end, the eBay pump and my pump performed basically the same. Here you can see that it's at 6.53 volts, which corresponds to about 2 or 3 pascals, or what, 1 or 2 millisects, something like that. I just, you know, it's some random arbitrary unit. This is not a calibrated gauge, so um, yeah, it is what it is. Either way, the pump rebuild did end up working. So if you end up having one of these pumps to rebuild, I hope this helps you and finds you a few of the pitfalls that you don't do to screw up your pump, and you have a good rebuild. Thanks for watching.